Welcome to this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, and I'll be your host for today's show. Once again, we're filming remotely to make sure that we are meeting guidelines for COVID-19, but the show must go on. So today we're going to be talking about COVID-19 and the board, governance amid unprecedented disruption. And joining me is a familiar face. Please welcome Julie Daum, who's the North American Board Practice Leader for Spencer Stuart. Welcome, Julie.
Hi, TK. Thanks for having me.
So not quite as homey as when we're sitting in the studios of the New York Stock Exchange, but again, this is becoming somewhat of the norm to be virtual. So let's talk about your business. And I know you, over the month of April, you spoke with several groups of directors of public companies to discuss how boards are exercising their oversight duties and meeting the challenges of this sort of extraordinary time. What were the main themes that sort of came out of those discussions?
So we have been convening directors since COVID happened. So groups of 10 to 15 directors to try to share what's happening at their companies, what they're seeing, how they're dealing with it. We've evolved from talking about number of meetings, how you're meeting, to compensation issues, to everything. We also, as part of our annual board index this year, did a survey of the nominating and governance committee chairs to see what they were experiencing as a result of COVID. Some of the findings are not surprising. If you serve on a board, you know that you are meeting once a week or once every other week. Some of that depends on the industry that you're in. If you're in retail, you're meeting weekly. If you're in some of the others, maybe every other week. So many more frequent points of contact. Those meetings tend to be an hour. And boards anticipate that that will lessen, but they're going to continue to have more communication. The other thing that surprised everybody is obviously everybody went virtual. The technology worked. But more importantly, I think that boards feel like they are able to have board meetings virtually. It's tiring. The pace is a little bit different, but it has worked. And so there is an anticipation that people are going to stay virtual for a while. No one knows what that means, but there is also talk among board members who are on boards that meet frequently that they will probably go from having every meeting in person to having virtual board meetings. So if they have 8 meetings a year, moving 2 of those or 3 to virtual, because their feeling was it does work. The flip side of that is you don't have the casual conversations in the hallway or over dinner. But the feeling is that you don't necessarily have to do that every time. So much to everyone's surprise, the meeting virtually worked much better than people anticipated, and that will continue. I think the other thing that went virtual that worked reasonably well were annual meetings. And I think most boards, or many boards, are thinking that they will make that a permanent change, that they will have virtual annual meetings. So those were the things that came out of just kind of the logistics of boards, that it was easier than everybody thought, that they were comfortable having more frequent meetings with management, with a recognition that they don't want to take up too much of management's time, but they want to be there, they want to be helpful, and they need to understand what's happening. So more frequent meetings, shorter meetings, and moving towards virtual.
So it is interesting that one of the things that COVID does was to force people sort of into this mode. And then everybody found out, well, it is doable. So the
Right.
positives of that are certainly you can be more carbon neutral. You can certainly save on time with a lot of the travel. And so people that I've talked to as well see a combination of in-person and virtual meetings. And so I won't be surprised at all. I am curious, though, Julie, in your discussions, did you see any particular type or group of directors um, specifically that are stepping up during the crisis?
So we actually have had these conversations and we put this in the survey. And it was really clear that there are differences in the contribution of directors during this time. So this is, I guess, the purpose of having diversity in the room. You don't know what crisis is going to happen. And so in the financial crisis, this experience that was needed was very different. This time, it is people who have strong operating backgrounds, who've been through a crisis of some sort. No one's been through this before, but who have been the most helpful to the board, but really to the management team. The other thing that people felt was really important were directors who served on more than one board. So they had the perspective of what was going on in other companies, and they could bring that into the room. And compensation was a great example of that. Okay, what are you doing? What are you doing? This is what we're seeing. So I think there was a real leaning on the most experienced directors in this during this time. I think that one of the things that's been interesting as we've interviewed people, they have said, all of them, operating experience and board experience was essential for the people who stepped up. The younger directors, less, really didn't have some of the perspective that was needed. But several people pointed out to us that this crisis was operating experience was important. But one of the things that's going to come out of this crisis is that businesses are going to be rethinking their strategies and their business plans going forward once they get through some of this. And so some of the people on the board who have more of a strategy background or academic background even may be more helpful going forward, and they will step forward, and some of the operating people will step back a bit. So I think one of the things that every board said to us is that they felt they had the right mix of experience in the room. Only 8% said they felt like they needed to add some background. Most of that would have been in technology. But most boards said, nope, we had the right people in the room, but different people contributed in a different way during this particular time. And they expect that will change a bit over time. So actually, we were a bit surprised that people did not feel like there were any gaps at all. Excuse me.
Well, we both know that there's so much to learn when directors can come together in this virtual format and sort of share ideas. We've seen that with the work you and I have done with the next gen board leaders and even with other groups. The more that goes to your comment about having how valuable people are that serve on multiple boards, you sort of get that benefit just by what they can bring to each board from other companies. Right. So makes perfect sense. So let me ask you a little bit about sort of your wheelhouse. Let's talk about board refreshment and succession management. So were boards sort of fit for purpose from a skill set perspective in the COVID environment? And how do directors feel the pandemic will impact sort of refreshment and succession planning going forward? Will there be any significant changes, do you think, in those spaces?
So, as I mentioned, boards felt they had the right skill set. So they're not saying, oh my gosh, we really need to reframe this board. We did ask them about how they feel about bringing on a new director in this time. And 25, a quarter of all boards said they would slow down any board refreshment they had planned right now. Some of that is because it's a bad time to bring people on when you're in the middle of a crisis. And some of it is also because boards got comfortable meeting virtually. They are even comfortable starting an interview process and beginning that virtually. But many boards are not comfortable adding a director who no one has met and who will come in during this time and have a difficult time kind of joining in and really getting oriented because it's virtual. So it will slow down board refreshment, which is okay from their perspective because they don't have gaping holes from their perspective. And they're waiting to see a bit about how long this is going to last, because in an ideal world, they would like to meet directors. But we do see boards, starting processes and having many of the meetings virtually. I think the biggest concern is how do you bring somebody on board if everything is virtual? It's easy to have a virtual meeting of a group of 8 people who've been together for a while, who know each other. But it's really hard for a new person to fit themselves into that virtually. So, as I said, a quarter have said they will slow down any board refreshment they were going to do and wait to see what happens here.
Yeah, the downside of that is we were actually seeing some pretty decent momentum in changing the diversity boardroom diversity. And to hear that is probably, I mean, I understand the challenges of onboarding somebody, but it is disappointing that that's probably going to impact a little bit the momentum that had been created.
I think that is true. As we were doing our the survey and our interviews following up on that, we did ask NomGov chairs about the issue of diversity. In this case, not gender, but racial diversity. And it is on everyone's mind. And so that I think there will be a real push. There was going to be a push anyway from the institutional investors on this issue this year, but it has taken on a heightened importance. So I don't think they will hold back bringing on, if they feel that is the need, I think they will move forward virtually. But it's early days where everyone's just talking about it now, and the importance of diversity in both the boardroom but also in the management suite. What's the board's role helping management on those issues?
Yeah, well, you and I know how important, though, the turnover was to changing some of the numbers, and if that does slow down too much, it hurts. But so we got about a minute left, Julie. I wanted to ask, what do you see as some of the impact on COVID in the boardroom from your perspective?
So I think I think that you're going to see, as I said, more virtual meetings, probably more communication between management and the board, but that could be a monthly letter to the board, but just more of that. We've seen the importance of board leadership, and I don't know that will change. I think whether lead directors or chairman, they have really stepped up during this time, and I don't think that will go back. I think they will continue to play a more important role than they did. And I think that I do think that boards are going to, they say that they have the right skill sets, but I think having faced something like this, as they go to do refreshment, they will be thinking about this and about diversity as they look at whether they do, at the skill sets they have in the room. So I think if they don't have a lot of operating experience, they probably will be looking for that, because that became apparent. And if they don't have diversity, that will become an issue. So I do think that there's a lot of thought that boards will need to do, about their refreshment. But as you and I have always talked about, there is very little turnover in the boardroom, and we're going to see that again when we release our board index for this year. Same thing, same amount of turnover. So change will be slow again.
Yeah. So where can people, I mean, you've covered, from 30,000 feet, a lot of interesting topics. Where can people get a copy of the survey results that you guys did at Spencer Stuart?
They are posted on our website, and we will soon be posting some more information about our board index for this year. So both things will be posted on there.
Well, great. Well, Julie, I want to thank you. It's always interesting to get an update on what's happening from your perspective. We know how active your organization you are in building those board skill sets. So keep up the good work. And again, we'll look forward to the index coming out and have you back on so we can talk about that as well. So thanks for your time.
Thank you, TK. And I wish this was in person.
Yeah. Well, that will conclude this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back again next week when we take another look at a critical topic that'll help you be a better board member or committee member. So we'll see you then.